I have finally done it. I've seen Star Wars A New Hope, or originally titled just Star Wars, on the big screen. Now, for a little bit of context, I've only ever seen this movie once in my lifetime, and that was around 10 to 15 years ago, so I didn't remember a lot about it. But if you're brand new here, I've been covering the Star Wars movies on my channel. I've covered the prequels, I've covered Rogue One, and now I'm on to episode 4, A New Hope. And what I can say is that I had a great time with this movie, but it's not my favourite Star Wars movie at the moment. Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to the channel and thank you for taking your own time out to check out my review for Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. I've been really looking forward to getting to this original trilogy, and I know I've got 2 more installments to go, which I am doing these videos weekly as they release weekly here in the UK cinemas, and I'm dropping those reviews as and when I've seen them, or worst case a few days after the fact. But I hope you guys are all doing well. A New Hope is directed by George Lucas. It's also written by him as well. A little bit of context, and again, gotta give a shout out to the Star Wars connoisseur, that is Anthony A. Perez, because he gives me a lot of history and backstory on these Star Wars movies, as that is his go-to thing. He's got tattoos and a lot of Star Wars, so if I know I need any knowledge on that matter, I go to him. Now, in regards with A New Hope, with everything aside, I've got to explain my standpoint on this movie before we go any further, because I know there's going to be people disagree in the comments. I know there's probably going to be some hate comment as well. I welcome it all, but at least got to appreciate where I'm coming from. So, as the UK cinemas are showing these once a week, as I'm seeing them, they started with the prequels. So, I went in and I watched the prequels, all 3 of them, and I had a blast with those movies. Last week, as I mentioned before, they showed Rogue One. So, of course, I watched Rogue One. Now, this week, they're showing A New Hope. So, of course, people's going to say, well, Mike, why did you not watch the original trilogy first? Why did you watch the prequels first? I'm just following the order that cinema is releasing them. But, besides all of that, the first Star Wars movie I ever saw was The Phantom Menace when I was 9 years old. Okay, so if you're wondering what is the plot of Star Wars A New Hope, if you've never seen this movie, basically it follows Princess Leia, who's played by Carrie Fisher, and she is kidnapped and held hostage by Darth Vader on board of the Death Star. It's up to Luke Skywalker, played by Mark Hamill, and Alec Guinness, who plays Obi-Wan Kenobi, along with 2 droids, to try free her and stop the Galactic Empire. Now, I was really intrigued to get to this one because I know Rogue One, a prequel to this, which followed the scroll that is the explanation at the beginning of this outing, and it fits hand in hand. They fit in actually really, really well, and I really liked that, and it definitely made me appreciate Rogue One that little bit more. But going into A New Hope, of course, Star Wars is not a thing at all without A New Hope. And I've got to just commend George Lucas firstly before we go anywhere. The fact of just the sheer determination, the brilliance, the idea, the spectacle, the lore, and just how he was able to get this off the ground. Because again, I've heard from Anthony that he struggled to get this made. No one really wanted to touch this whatsoever, but eventually someone did, and it's become one of the biggest things in my lifetime, and probably in cinematic years to come, and probably centuries to come, right? So this is just something that is truly incredible, and just, you know, got to commend them for having this really cool idea, cool characters, cool visuals at the time, because the thing is, I'm going to tackle this review from 2 perspectives, right? The first perspective is, because this was made in 1977, I think the quality I saw of this in the cinema, I think it was like kind of 1080, like Blu-ray quality. It didn't seem 4K quality, let me put it that way. But being made in 1977, for its time, I can definitely respect that this was a visual treat. It was probably a masterpiece. It was probably something where back then, people were like, wow, I didn't realize we could have something this good, you know. And for that standpoint, I can respect A New Hope because it's got a really cool cast, and of course these actors and actresses here are only going to get better over time. They of course have better performances later on down the line and in other projects except from Star Wars. But it's just so cool to see the foundations of Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, Peter Mayhew, Peter Cushing, and so many more. And one of the biggest praises I've got to give, which of course goes to John Williams' iconic score. Now, the music that is produced here is just something that is out of this world. Whether you have seen Star Wars or whether you've seen that particular Star Wars out or not, anywhere you go, you recognize this music. And if your music can have that much of an impact to the point of just years and years later, where 2027 it's going to be 50 years since this released, then that just goes to show you've done something right. You've hit that lightning in a bottle. And this is just a perfect example of what this movie is. A lightning in a bottle, a monumental achievement for cinema and film history, and I can absolutely not fault the movie for that, right? And I think there's still a lot here that's likable. The characters are still likable despite having goofy and cheesy moments. It's a start of a story and a start of a trilogy where of course they're going to expand this, give us more story, probably improve the visuals and everything, and I can't wait to review and check out those two next installments, The Empire Strikes Back and of course Return of the Jedi. But just addressing A New Hope, I like the characters. Darth Vader of course is awesome as always. Really got to be my favorite character of all time. I can't doubt that for a single second. But all of that works just hand in hand, works in tandem, and it just glues and works so well together that this movie just breezed over. I didn't feel the runtime whatsoever. I didn't have a problem with the pacing. The acting was good, especially for like that time and for what they were delivering, especially in the 77, you know, like, so this was a long time ago, so of course the acting is going to be different compared to say a more recent Star Wars movie. Now, I've got a lot of praise and a lot of love for this movie because I actually did have a really good time with A New Hope, but this is where I've got to address some negatives, which I think people is probably going to disagree with, but that's cool. But at least hear me out. So now, I mentioned in the introduction before about watching the prequels and then Rogue One, and now I'm on to A New Hope. Now, of course, there's going to be dated visuals, there's going to be dated dialogue moments, there's going to be dated elements that are not going to hold up, and that is absolutely what this movie is, right? There's definitely a lot of parts of it that does not hold up to 2024 as I'm recording this, which is fine. And of course, I give the movie sort of a pass for that because, again, it was not made in 2024, right? On the other hand, one of the problems that I had personally is, as of right now, my favorite Star Wars movie until I watch Empire Strikes Back, and then of course Return of the Jedi, and then of course the newer trilogy, so then I can give you guys an official ranking here on the channel. Revenge of the Sith is my favourite movie of the ones I've seen so far. And I think the problem is, again, I appreciate without this movie there's no Star Wars, but when you go back and watch this one, after you've watched the prequels of how much it builds up on Obi-Wan and Anakin Skywalker, that gets us to this point where they meet all those years later in A New Hope, which of course is a big fight showdown of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. That lightsaber battle does not hold up. I mean, in terms of the effectiveness and how much this should have really been an absolutely a huge and monumentous moment. Again, it's hard to critique and it's hard to judge that factor, but it is something you've got to ultimately weigh in if you're going to watch all the Star Wars movies in one go. as I am doing. Of course, there's some dated elements and visual effects and all that kind of stuff as well, which just comes off goofy and laughable. But I think that is kind of the one big thing for me that stopped this from getting a 4-5-star review, is some of the stuff that they do in the prequels, which only help to elevate some of the moments in this original outing with what's been built up before, plus Rogue One. But then when you watch this one, especially like as I'm doing, and say if anyone is brand new to Star Wars, they watch 1, 2, 3, then Rogue One, and then A New Hope, they are going to see parts of being like, well, why is there not so much of the history of what we've just learned of the first 3? Why have we not got such an epic and outcry battle? And I think that is very important to take, and also very important to acknowledge. And I appreciate there's going to be people who are only fans of the original and they acknowledge nothing else, right? And that's fine. That's up to you. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But for me, reviewing this from a fair and level head and going into these movies without any expectations and taking them for what they are, but of course taking in the world building and story we've had so far of 3 original trilogy movies and a prequel, you can't help but not overlook that at times. But with all that said, my score for A New Hope would be a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So still a solid score, still a very respectable score, and this is definitely a great Star Wars movie. No doubt about it. And I did thoroughly enjoy this, and I definitely would watch this again. But where do you stand on A New Hope? Do you like this movie? Do you love this movie? Heck, do you hate A New Hope? Let me know down below in the comment section so we can continue the discussion down there. Big thanks to all my awesome patrons for helping to support the channel. I really do appreciate it. Get your name in the limelight like these legends, and you can join today from only £2 per month in the link down below in the description box. Now, in the meantime, if you want to see my review for Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, click here. And if you want to see my review for Rogue One, a Star Wars story, the prequel, click right here and have a bit of a deep dive. But till next time, I'll see you guys. I'll be seeing you later.